Mr. Revolver Guy with DayAtTheRange.com. Before we get started with anything, we're going to do the safety check to make sure that the firearms we're handling today are completely safe. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 640 5-shot J-frame revolver, safe and cleared. The Kimber K6S stainless 6-shot revolver, safe and cleared. So this is episode number 2 in a mini series that I'm conducting on the comparison of the Kimber K6S revolver and the Smith & Wesson Model 640. How I came about this review is allowing a friend of mine to shoot the Kimber K6 and tell me what he thinks about it. As we were on the range that day, he asked me a question that I contemplated for some time. What is the difference outside of the 6-shot and the Smith & Wesson Model 640? Now, under the covers, I know he's pretty much a Smith & Wesson bigot, if you will. His fondness of Smith & Wesson revolvers probably goes even further than mine. And I want to thank him also for loaning me both of the Smith & Wesson Model 640s that you will see in this mini series going forward. Now down to business. As you can see here on the bench in front of me, I have the Hornady digital caliper, the RCBS trigger gauge pull. We will be using the Hornady caliber to measure the width of the revolvers and the sight radius. Sight radius is important to me. I believe it helps you shoot a little bit more accurate while out on the range. Though these are not really made for long distance shooting, this is pretty much for the concealed and carry world and self-defense. We'll use the RCBS trigger gauge pull to test the triggers and the weight of each. I can tell you, I do believe that purely just by feel, the Smith & Wesson trigger is a little heavier, though very smooth and glass-like. The Kimber trigger is very smooth, not quite as smooth as the Smith & Wesson, but seems to be a hair lighter. Before I get started, to try to help you understand, the viewer, this Smith & Wesson Model 640 is from the Performance Center. So when you talk about quality of build, I believe they both are on par. And I think that's pretty much why the quality of build, why the price of the Kimber K6S is where it is at this point. I've seen this revolver going from $650 upwards of $899, where the MSRP, I believe, resides today. So the quality is about the same. When you look over the revolver for fit and finish, I believe the quality is about the same, outside of me needing to clean both, of course. The Smith & Wesson Model 640 has a front sight adjustable if you had to. I don't see a need to ever do so. And the rear sight is notched into the frame in and of itself. It sports a 2 5/8 inch barrel and an integral compensator. And again, it is a 5-shot revolver. Comes with the inlaid Smith & Wesson medallion and wood grips. The Kimber, if you've seen episode 1, you've seen me go through those statistics in episode 1, but I will just highlight on the Kimber right quickly. Cylinder release is much like the Ruger, where it's push versus slide forward on the Smith & Wesson. It is a 6-shot revolver, 2-inch barrel, pinned front sight, and also notch windage rear sight. Again, haven't seen a real need to adjust the sights in any way, form, or fashion. Seems to shoot right on. Again, please check out episode 1 on DayAtTheRange.com. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, and why I need to thank the person that loaned me these revolvers again and trusted me with them. This particular revolver, the Smith & Wesson Model 640, is a Paxton Quigley edition. That particular, or this particular edition in and of itself, there were only 250 of these made. Paxton Quigley, famous author of Armed and Female. So now down to it. With the caliber, what we will be doing is measuring the width of each revolver, kind of simulating the ease of concealability, if you will. Again, measuring also the sight radius of each revolver, and then we'll move on to the trigger pull. So first, the width. At the widest point for the Smith & Wesson 640, calipers show 1.3 inches at the widest point with the 5-shot revolver. For the Kimber, in the way they've designed the cylinder with flats, it too comes in at 1.3 inches. What's amazing about that to me is, again, this cylinder is a 6-shot cylinder. Those flats has shaved some of the girth, if you will, to make it easier or just as easy to conceal as a 5-shot revolver. Now, sight radius on the Smith & Wesson 640. I would call it 4.2, almost 4.3 inches. Sight radius of the Kimber K6 from about the same measuring point is 4.2 for the sight radius of the Kimber K6. So just about the same there. Now we're going to go for what we're here on the bench for, is testing trigger pull. Again, let's see if my trigger finger tells the truth, where I believe the Smith & Wesson is heavier, though smoother. We will test 3 times for consistency and see what we come up with. On the first trigger pull, we come up with 12 pounds from the Smith & Wesson 640. Going for the second trigger pull. The second trigger pull, 12 pounds, again on the Smith & Wesson 640. It doesn't quite feel like 12 pounds, again, because of how smooth the action is. But Smith is known in their J-frame revolver for heavier trigger pulls. I believe because they're meant to be self-defense pistols or revolvers. And you want to make sure when you're pulling that trigger, you absolutely know where that round's going. You want no accidental discharges. Third trigger pull. Third trigger pull, again, comes in at 12 pounds. Now, on for the Kimber K6. As in episode 1, I did not test the trigger pull, but here today we will. My trigger finger is not too bad. The Kimber does come in lighter at a 10-pound trigger pull. Second, again, right at 10 pounds for the Kimber. And the third, again, right on the mark at 10 pounds for the trigger on the Kimber K6S revolver. Again, as you can see, though it is a totally new design, there is much debate on Kimber looking at the design of the Smith & Wesson Model 640 and following it, but Grant Cunningham has talked about that a lot here lately as he was on the design team for the Kimber. And it is a totally new ground up build, but as you can see to the naked eye, very similar. Again, to the naked eye, not talking about the internals, just the externals. Also on this particular model 640, it is only 38 special. Only 38 special. All right, so that wraps up the tabletop review or the tabletop comparison in episode number 2. Please join me back for episode number 3, which is range day for the Smith & Wesson Model 640. On range day, we will shoot 38 special ammo across the chronograph to capture feet per second, standard deviation, and extreme spread. We'll also be testing, of course, for reliability, accuracy, and the subjective perceived recoil out of both. Mr. Revolver Guy, dayattherange.com.